In this video, I'm going to be covering how to deal with null values. Previously, we've touched on the idea that null is used in databases to represent the absence of data or information. As an example, in our database, we have a table called customer, and for each customer, we store their email address. But when a customer doesn't provide us with their email address, that's where we use null to represent that. Null simply says, we don't know what the customer's email address is. Let's pull up our customer table now. If we now wanted to return only those customers that didn't provide us with an email address, so where the email address is null, the way we do that is as follows. We have to write where email is null. And conversely, if we wanted to only return the customers where the email address is not null, we would write email is not null, and we can run that. So we use the keywords is null or is not null to return the rows that we're after. You may be wondering why we can't just use the equals sign. So for example, if we wanted to return customers where the email is null, why couldn't we just write equals null? Let's give it a go. We didn't get any results. What about if we wanted to see where the email address was not null? Let's try the not equals to. That didn't work either. What's happened here is that in SQL, the evaluation of some comparison can actually be either true, false, or unknown. SQL uses something called three-valued logic. When you're doing comparisons that don't involve null, you'll always just get true or false. So if you're working with a column like create date, like the customer table has, which can't be null, the result is always just going to be true or false, and you've got no problems. However, comparing anything with null results in unknown. So when we were just trying now email equals null, and now we were trying email is not equal to null, in both cases the result was unknown. And what's interesting is that a where clause will only ever return rows that evaluate to true. So it won't return rows that evaluate to false, and it won't return rows that evaluate to unknown. What that means is that if you're filtering on a column that could have null values, you have to be extra careful. Let me give you an example of where you have to be careful, looking at the film table. Let's bring up the film table now. And what I'm interested in is the rating column. So let's just change this so we're only returning the title and the rating for each film. I'm working with the rating table, but I know that I actually have to be careful here because I know already that this column could contain nulls. How do I know that? One really easy way you can check if a column could contain null values is to go over to your relationship diagram. And what we want to do is right-click anywhere here in the background, go View Styles, and Show Nullability. And we can see looking at our rating column that it doesn't say not null next to it. So that indicates that this column does accept null values. Incidentally, because null is quite difficult to work with, this is also why if you're designing your own database, you should put not null constraints on columns as much as possible, to ensure that null values don't accidentally get inserted where you don't want them to be. Let's go back to the exercise though, and what we want to do is view all films where the rating is not PG. So let's first take a naive attempt at it. Let's say from film where rating is not PG, and we can run that. And we got 804 rows. However, we've now learned that if a film does have a null rating, this check that we're doing, this rating is not equal to PG, would actually evaluate to unknown for that film, and therefore that film would not be returned in our results because it did not evaluate to true. But we actually want that here. We want to know all films where the rating is not PG, and that includes films that don't have a rating. The way we can do that is to update our query to also check if the rating is null. And we can run that, and now we see that we got 807 rows returned. So what that means is that there were 3 films that had a null rating. And now we have a true complete list of all of the films that are not rated PG. Null is quite a tricky concept to deal with. Whenever you're writing queries in the future, you should always be checking if the columns you're working with could contain null values, and if they do, you usually have to do something explicitly to handle that to make sure that your query is still correct.